Hello everybody, welcome to Break Remake. I'm your host Joan. Today we're going to talk about easy pattern making. You can make a carbon copy of your favorite t-shirt just like this one. Let me show you how to do it. Our first step is to iron our shirt in half so we can see a crisp center front line. It'll help us when we're laying it out to copy the shirt.
I'm lining up my seam all the way up to the armpit so it's exactly in half. Now I'm going to press this so it has a crisp center line.
I'm gonna lay the shirt on alpha-numeric paper. It has a grid on it that's inch wide. If you don't have the alpha-numeric paper, that's totally fine. You can tape together newspaper, paper bags, whatever you have laying around to make your pattern. I just find that the grid makes my life easier.
I'm drawing my strong center front line now so I know where to line up the folds on my shirt.
We ironed our shirt. We have this nice, strong, crisp line. I'm gonna line up the center line with the line I just drew on my paper.
You might not be able to see it on camera, but I have a nice, strong center line fold. I'm lining it up with the line on my paper, and now I know that I have the center, the dead center. I'm gonna lay my pattern weights out to hold my fabric in place, and then I can start tracing this.
I'm gonna use the clear grid ruler to hold my shirt down while I trace it out. And I'm gonna make my shirt sleeve and shirt body one piece, so there's no setting in an armhole. Pretty magical. Your fronts and your backs are different shapes, so you have to trace both.
Let's start drawing. I don't like this dip and this bulge. I'm gonna kind of even that out. Stop 2.5 inches below your armpit, and we're just gonna gently curve that armhole into the sleeve. Magic. Done. That's it. I'm just going to continue tracing around the shirt. This seam is rolled into the front of the shirt. We're kind of just going to ignore that, and we're just going to go for the fold, where the fold is. I'm going to make it a lot more boxy than it originally is. It dips in. How do I get the neck hole if they're on top of each other? Well, hold it down and get your pencil in there. I'm going to fold everything back and start going against my ruler, section by section. Now we can kind of true this up. This needs to be flat for at least 1/2 inch. This needs to be flat here, perpendicular to the shoulder seam, and then you can just redraw this curve. Done. That's not needed.
Now we're gonna add our seam allowance.
I'm doing 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm just lining my ruler up at the 1/2 inch mark. Drawing this straight line. I'm just curving the ruler and making a little mark where my ruler hits. And then I can redraw that curve.
I'm only adding seam allowance at the shoulder seam and the side seam. The rest of it, if we're making this out of knit, we don't need to finish the edges, and I usually don't.
Where your pattern piece and your seam allowance don't match each other or don't meet each other, you just connect them. Now I'll cut out on the outside lines.
Finish tracing out your back and adding seam allowance to your back, and then we're ready to get cutting out in our fabric. Label your pattern so you know what pattern this is, because you're gonna start making all your own patterns from now on. Now that our pattern pieces are cut out, let's just lay them on top of each other to see if the side seams true up. That means they are pretty much the same.
It looks like the back is a little deeper, but let's see if that matches up ultimately. I just move the paper along where I would sew it. My back and my front are a little off from each other. Here's the difference on my front to back on my shoulders. Pretty nice.
I'm gonna use my ruler to make the adjustments however wide I need to on my front, and then we can start moving into our fabric. Knit is a little woodgy, so take your time, do it right, make sure your salvages are matched, make sure there's no bubbles. It'll be all right. I've got my fabric laid out, I've got my pattern laid out. Now we can anchor it down with our pattern weights, which are actually just giant washers, and cut the fabric. Woo, so exciting! I've got my pieces all cut out. I have two options of sewing this together. I can either use an overlock or a serger machine, or I can zigzag these pieces together. If you don't have an overlock, then you can totally use a sewing machine, a regular sewing machine. And if you have trouble, switch your needle out for a stretch or a knit needle. That will make your life so much easier. Your fabric will not get punched into the disc at the bottom of the machine, or it won't skip stitches, or all the terrible things that happen when you're trying to sew knits. Just to show you the difference, I'm gonna use the overlock to sew my side seams and then the sewing machine to sew my shoulders. I'm pinning this just so it doesn't shift on me while I'm stitching it, and I have to take the pins out before the blade cuts them on the overlock. So it's a little exciting. I am going to try with the regular needle first on the sewing machine, and then if it's messed up, I will switch to my stretch needle. Wish me luck. Sounds like I need to change my needle, but so far there's no skip stitches. With my overlock ends, I'm going to cut them a little shorter, and I'm going to use a yarn darner, and I'm going to weave them back into my stitch. I'm going to weave it in here for like an inch. Ta-da, and we're done. No finished neck, no finished hems, but it's a really quick, instant gratification sewing project. It's a great introduction to knits, and it's a great introduction to copying your own garments. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more sustainable, fun DIYs. We'll see you next time. Bye. You're just gonna keep going, huh, Mr. Giggles?